The last 2 months have just been so insane. If you're self-employed, it's up to you to get the work done because no one else is going to do it. I saw Puss in Boots. I loved it. So I made the joke of the Twitter user being Bubble Bass. Honestly, it wasn't even a good joke. I didn't expect it would gain the traction that it did. It's funny that as much as people talk about Twitter being a cesspool of politics, that's probably the most normal aspect of Twitter. Now anybody can make a song or make a video. Our jobs are entirely because these niches can exist, because otherwise we could never do the stuff that we did. It's always easy to go doomer and think that this trajectory could keep getting worse. There is always a possibility that this could be just something in our time right now, and this isn't a sign of things to come.
Hey, welcome to the Create Unknown, the home of Make Something Mean Something. It is TCU's Day. We are here live on Discord every single Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern. I am Kevin Lieber. With me, as always, is Matthew Tabor.
Yeah, and we're going to get to the guest, but first, I want to congratulate another YouTuber on a very odd milestone that's related to the Create Unknown. This YouTuber is Kevin Lieber of Vsauce2, who today you relaunched Mindblow with the Bring Back Mindblow project, and people are loving it. They're really liking it, and we did an episode a while back about why Mindblow got wrapped up in the first place 5-6 years ago. And Kevin's just done a really good job with bringing that back in a fresh way that, hits the thing that people loved, but does it in a way that is totally current. And it's something we don't see a lot of on YouTube. We've talked to so many people about what you do with old formats that were successful. When you move on, do you really have to move on? Well, most of the time you do. But Kevin's kind of pulling off the impossible on this. And it's really cool to see all these people come out and say, this is what inspired me to go into mechanical engineering, or I really got into probability and statistics from your videos. The community has aged up a little bit and actually used the inspiration that they got from Mindblow and the other early videos. So anyway, just well done on that. And anybody who's around from Vsauce2 and is new here, we're happy to have you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the feedback has been really heartwarming. A lot of it, it's been a while, I guess. It's been 5 years since Mindblow has been off the air, so to speak. So it has been nice to get some comments from people who really loved and missed it. I mean, I knew that was the point of bringing it back. It's like people have been asking for the show for 5 years. Like I knew that they were missing it. So
did you say in the podcast though that we did that you would never bring it back? See, I can't remember if you absolutely said never. I hope you did. I hope you did, so we can quote you on a lie. I want to catch you in it.
And then just, use that as a lesson for you never know what's going to happen. Truly. Yeah, you really don't. But real quick, on February 21st, that chapter will be joining us here in the Create Unknown. So that will be an awesome episode. But tonight, we have a return guest, Alternate History Hub, who we meant to have last month, but ran into some flooding issues, some personal life things happened. And that's Cody, where I really wanted to start with you, because I also noticed some tweets recently about, I don't know, like electrical poles falling down and losing power and internet. Like a lot of things happen in life that you can't really predict, yet you still have to work around them. So I would love if you just started by talking a little bit about how you've been able to overcome life happening the past 2 months.
Well, first off, thank you guys for having me back on. It's great to be back. Things have been hectic. So I have a 3-month-old, beautiful baby boy. I'm a proud papa now, which is great. But the last 2 months have just been so insane. Just things have happened, and half of it's because of living in Texas during the winter. So to clarify what happened with the whole flooding, on Christmas Eve, my attic flooded because a pipe burst, a copper pipe, and it just tons of water came down from the ceiling. So that was a great thing to wake up to. My cat sitter walked into my house and water was just coming through the light fixtures, coming through the ceiling. And she sent a picture, and I was just like, you have to turn the water off, because
right.
I was states away at that time. I was visiting family up in Ohio. And so I couldn't do anything. I felt so powerless. My whole house was getting flooded. I wasn't even there to stop it. So props to my cat sitter. She was just this kind old lady, and she had to go out into my front yard and turn my water off, and she never knew how to do any of that. So I had to talk her through it and get her to shut it off. But the damage had already kind of been done. The ceiling in my kitchen and half of my living room was pretty much destroyed. I had flooding in 2 rooms, and I had to get the carpet ripped out of that. The good news was that for most of my living room and my kitchen, I have this orange brick, this really old brick that I haven't seen in like any other house. And it's not like vinyl, it's not like carpet, it's just stone. And because of that, because I had that flooring, luckily there wasn't as much damage to the floor, because there ended up being about half an inch of water throughout the whole house. But if it was just a little bit more, I would have had to tear all that brick out. But luckily the brick was able to seal it all in. But that was something that waking up on Christmas Eve was not fun. I then had to fly back the day after Christmas, spend a week in Texas away from my wife and my kid, and just try to get everything in order. And because it's winter here, everyone had the same exact problem. So a bunch of other pipes burst all over the whole state. So every plumber, every contractor was just busy and booked. It took me 2 weeks to get a water mitigation team to come and tear everything out. So me even coming down there was kind of pointless, because I couldn't get anybody to even tear the stuff out. Luckily, though, it was so cold, no mold or anything developed, but it was still just not a great way to start off the year. So then I felt bad, because I had to do the podcast. But I think it was we had a plan for like the beginning of January, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it was something like that. Yeah. So I had to fly back to Ohio, pick my wife and kid up, and then drive back to Texas. So in the span of a week, I traveled a few thousand miles, and that was fun. And so I came back, and then all of January was basically getting a water mitigation team to come back. The insurance dealt with it, and I'm rambling, but that was all fun. That was all fun happening. And then
I have questions
everything was
about
coming
this.
back.
No. Sorry, finish. I want to hear.
I just don't want to ramble details about my life problems. I don't know if anybody would care about that.
It's very real life problems when you do the kind of stuff that you and we do. But real quick, you said the cat sitter was there doing this. How do the cats handle this flood? Because I think if you're a cat, a monstrous flood from above has to be like, there's no way a cat could process this.
Yeah, you can't escape it. So this is the funny thing. We have 2 cats. My cat's called Luna. My wife's cat is Taurus. And they kind of hate each other. So they split and they divided the house, because cats love their territory. So they divided the house up. Luna has the upstairs and Taurus has the downstairs. And the downstairs was what was flooded. The upstairs wasn't really affected at all, because my attic, despite being on the 2nd floor, it's like a half house. So the attic only flooded the downstairs. It didn't flood anything of the upstairs. Taurus would have been probably super wet, and that would have been an issue. But he wasn't at the house at the time, because we had to take the cat up north with us. He got some scratch that got like affected a week before we left, and I had to like go to the vet, and we spent a few $100s trying to get him patched up, but we couldn't leave him alone, and we couldn't let him stay at the house by himself like we normally do. So we had to take the cat up with us. So he wasn't there when the house got flooded. But had he actually been there, he probably would have gotten drenched or something, and that would have been a whole other issue. But luckily, he wasn't.
It just gets worse, doesn't it? Hey, Kevin and I are listening to this. We're just like, wow, this is like the book of Job for a YouTuber.
Things have, I've only gotten.
How did you anger God? What precisely did you do for this to rain down on you?
I don't know what I did. I think maybe I stepped on a crack. Maybe I accidentally broke a window that I didn't know about it. Maybe I stepped on a window or stepped on a mirror. It's a mirror, not a window. Maybe I stepped on a mirror. Who knows? But yeah, it was just ever since, I actually started it. I knew the year wasn't going to start off well when it was the Alabama, it was some game. It was, I forgot who was playing. Was it Ohio State? I'm pretty sure it was an Ohio State game. And they lost by a field goal at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Day. And I was like, well, that's not a great sign. You don't like to see that. You don't like to see that. So I don't know. Ever since then, January was just kind of hectic. I only got one video out, and then after I got that video out, and that's also with taking care of a newborn and everything. Then we had another winter storm come in, and that was last week, and a whole bunch of ice came in, and you know how the Texas power grid is with cold, and we ended up losing power for 2 days. And it wasn't even just because of the power grid. It was because there was so much ice that rained down that it made the trees collapse, because the trees here aren't built to withstand that much ice. So we had trees just falling. I had one a block away take out a power line, and it took them 2 days to come out and fix the whole thing. So that was fun. That was on top of everything. So.
Yeah, and a lot of people, like, especially if you've only, for example, like rented apartments, you don't fully realize how much stuff runs on electricity. So, like water pumps and things like when the electricity goes out, my well doesn't pump, right? So then all of a sudden, no electricity means no water, and that means you get one flush of the toilet. And it's an inconvenience if it's count. Yeah, you absolutely need to sit down and make that one count, right?
It makes you really appreciate just the mundane things that we take for granted, like heat and electricity. It's like the second those go away, it's like your entire everything you do is just changed. And we were huddled around. Well, we stayed in a hotel each night. But it was super difficult to even find a hotel because this affected the entire city. So everyone was getting a hotel. So we had to drive like 40 minutes away to even find the closest room to stay in. But when we stayed in the house during the day, we had to use the fireplace and just huddled around it, just like trying to stay warm. It felt like we went 200 years back in the past. So that was fun. In a blink,
which is fitting for you with having a history channel. Maybe that would be good for you, every now and then, doing a little immersion.
Next
time it happens,
it became Townsend's. How about that?
Next time it happens, I'll just break out the old butter churner and just go and milk some cows, do the full immersion, the full experience. That'll be great.
It's the way the future is the past.
It
the future is the best. That's 2024. That'll be but this, it's been hectic. So thank you everybody for listening to how terrible my last month has been, I guess.
But we've talked about life coming up. We've talked about how when things go wrong for normal people, they can go to work and it's a totally separate thing for the most part. And if it's like your city gets obliterated by a storm, everybody's in trouble there. But most of the time, your home problems and your life problems are really separate from work problems. But for us, it's as simple as like somebody in your house gets sick. You lose power, you've lost it for life, and you've lost it for work, until that's back on. You have a flood. Yeah, your home got flooded, but but so did your workplace. It's really a comprehensive problem every time there is a problem. Did it damage or wipe out like any tech studio kind of stuff for work?
Luckily it didn't, because my office is on the second floor. So all of that was spared, but it did kind of ruin a router. So I had 2 Wi-Fi routers and one of them got destroyed, which sucked because that was the good one. So now I'm on. That's why my internet is not really that great right now, because I'm still using the cheap company router that my internet provider has. So it's not fun. But you're right. It really does destroy your schedule, and it's really any hiccup you can. If you have the time, you just have to work as much as possible, because you never know when the next hiccup is going to happen, and it's going to just destroy any progress you've made. So yeah, I've only had 1 video out this month, and it's all just because there's the little things that just happen. And I was kind of worried when I first, I was super glad to be a dad and stuff like that, but also it's like, raising a kid that interferes with your work. And luckily, my baby boy has not been at all the hindrance on my schedule. It's been everything else. Yeah. And he's been my almost my escape from all the other hectic shit that's happening, because a baby's simple compared to insurance stuff and your house flooding. You just got to change them. You just got to feed them. And then when they cry, you're like, no. But compared to all the other stuff happening, not fun. So yeah. But yeah, I think that's anyone that's self-employed. If you're self-employed, it's it's up to you to get the work done, because no one else is going to do it. Yeah,
something is going to go wrong for somebody at some point. So getting a couple things ready, then when things do go very badly, whether it is the sniffles or getting hit by a bus, you at least have some content to save you.
You don't have to worry
for
about
a week or 2. Well, that's right. There's a point at which it's just not your problem anymore.
Bigger problems.
Right.
Yeah. But
that's true.
I don't know what you've been sipping, but you've got it all wrong. It's time to commit to the Leaf. We've embraced the smoothness and surprising pick-me-up that tea provides. I literally drink it all day long, nearly a gallon a day, and it powers me through research, script writing, and forums on websites that I refuse to name here. But we don't drink normie NPC tea. We drink cultured and refined anime tea from the Dragon's Treasure. Kevin still likes the gunpowder green called Space Cowboy, and I've sampled nearly 40 Dragon's Treasure teas at this point. Lately, I've been slamming black teas like Kentucky Bourbon and Liquefied Berserk Despair. Scottish Breakfast is deep and peaty, and I smooth it over with Sebastian's Morning Earl Grey, which has the best vanilla cream taste I think I've ever had in a cup. Give me a pot of that with a hot meatball sub from Sal's Pizza and Brooks Barbecue Chicken to wash down my last meal on death row. I highly recommend the sampler packs. You'll want to try everything just like I did. I literally have not had one tea that I wouldn't be happy to reorder. The Dragon's Wings membership fuels new tea experimentation, and the Tea of the Month Club provides a regularly scheduled surprise. And when you order from the Dragon's Treasure using code CREATE, you'll get 10% off your order. That's 10% off using the code CREATE at thedragonstreasure.com. The link's in the description.
Cody, I really wanted to ask you about some other types of problems, and that was something that you encountered on Twitter recently that I was following with my own sick amusement. But I think it's gone now, so you would need to kind of fill us in about this meme, this Puss in Boots meme that turned into like this crazed fandom sort of swirling you around you, and then it turned into another fandom. I don't remember who then, but it was like Cody was just like laying traps for different fandoms, and they were arriving, and it turned into like kind of a disaster.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought this up, because there is no reason why I would ever bring this horrible thing up again. Okay, so the whole thing began when I saw Puss in Boots like last month. I loved it. It's a great movie. If you haven't seen Puss in Boots 2, go see it. But I saw Twitter doing what Twitter always does, and they just take something that's really good and they just kind of run it into the ground. Like if anything is even slightly interesting, they'll act like it's the greatest thing ever and then make it just kind of annoying. So they were sort of doing that with Puss in Boots too. They were just kept talking about a certain scene, which was when Puss in Boots has a panic attack, which is a great, really well done scene, and it accurately portrays how a panic attack happens. But the problem was the same person kept repeating, like, well, not the same person, but you had the same similar 5 posts just all talking about this panic attack. And so my feed was just flooded with the same exact scene saying how well done the Puss in Boots panic attack scene is. And I was just kind of slightly annoyed by it. I wasn't even mad. I wasn't even like, oh, this is super dumb. I just decided, this is kind of funny that a bunch of adults are talking about this one scene in an animated movie. And so I made a meme just with SpongeBob and what's his name? Who's the fat guy from SpongeBob? The one who says no pickles. No, Bubble Bass. Bubble Bass. It was that scene where Bubble Bass sits on plankton in the movie theater. So you had a movie theater and a super fat Bubble Bass next to a small SpongeBob. So I made the joke of the Twitter user being Bubble Bass explaining the panic attack scene to the 7-year-old. And honestly, it wasn't even a good joke. It wasn't even funny. Like, it was just kind of something I casually made just as like, isn't this funny? Like, the Twitter is over explaining a scene to a kid. And then I didn't expect it would gain the traction that it did. Like, it seemed to strike a nerve with so many people. And all these people took a different meaning from this meme that took like 5 seconds to make, and I didn't even really put much thought into it. And so some people were like, oh, you know, this is why animation is never taken seriously, or like, oh, animation is just for kids, right? Or how dare you undermine a great movie? And it's like, I liked the movie, and everyone was acting like I didn't like the movie, or like I misinterpreted, or I didn't get it. And it was like, no, it was just a silly meme about people talking too much about something that's good. You know, it's like too much of a good thing is bad. That's what it was. That was the whole point of it. And then people just misinterpreted it. And cartoon Twitter scares me now. They terrify me. If you say one slightly wrong thing, they are worse than political Twitter. People think, oh, Twitter's so bad because of the politics. No, the politics is like it's the least crazy aspect of that site. Cartoon Twitter just goes after you. And it ended up, the reason I deleted the tweet even was because it got like 60,000 likes. And then all the quote tweets were just taking it out of context. And I was like, and then I just started feeling bad because I was like, what did I even mean by this original meme? It took on such a different life of its own. I started thinking about what my original intention even was. And it's kind of funny because sometimes on social media, you kind of don't think about this thing that you'll tweet. Like, I don't know, at least that's me, and that's a problem that I need to work on. But it's such an easy thing to do. You type out a thought, or you make a meme and you just send it out, and you don't think about how many people actually truly see that thing that you type or how they interpret it. And I guess that was a good flash of reality that a lot of people can misinterpret, or not even misinterpret, because it was a very vague meme, but they can take a bunch of different ideas from one single image. So that happened. I deleted it because I kind of felt bad, and I didn't want people to think that I was shitting on animation, because there is a way that you could take that as me shitting on animation, and I love animation. So I was like, okay, I'm going to delete this because I don't want people getting offended by something that I didn't even mean to say, but if they take it as that, then I should probably get rid of it. So I deleted that, and then I made the joke of, God, I don't even want this was the worst one. I don't even know if I want to bring this up, but
please do.
I'm excited.
I forgot what it was.
Okay, so I kind of leaned into the joke of a random community that you don't think about coming after me and wanting to kill me. So what happened is I jokingly was like, I want to piss off another community. Why not? And so as a joke, I just said, let's make the anime community mad by saying that it's creepy to like lolly and sexualize lollies or whatever, or like lollies. I thought it was because it was creepy, you know, it's drawings of little girls. And I was like, no, I didn't think anybody would actually be offended by that. And then they were.
What?
And it wasn't even funny. Like the cartoon Puss in Boots thing was funny because a lot of people misinterpreted a thing I said and then they came after me over it. And it was kind of lighthearted. Like they weren't like that mean. They were just, they thought I said something shitting on animation. These were then people that came out of like the darkest parts of Twitter and were angry that I said that it's creepy to sexualize drawing or like to like lolly. I thought because it's creepy. I think it's creepy. And then they all came after me and they were like, no, you're wrong. It's perfectly normal, or it's based or whatever, as they said. I feel dirty even talking about this. I don't like talking about this.
Let me lighten the lolly mood because I have a minor lolly story that isn't. There's an app that is the same thing as like Honey, you know, that does discount codes when you check out on things, and you get a little money. PayPal owns Honey now, so you get a couple % rewards, whatever. There's an app that does that just gives you Bitcoin, the same exact thing as Honey, but you get Bitcoin instead of straight money, and it's called Lolly, LOLLI. And I don't use it precisely because, you know, every week or whatever you get a newsletter and I just see Lolly pop in my inbox and I get this ick. Just like, no, why did you name it this? It's such a benign thing. Yeah, and it's not like it got named in like 1981 when nobody realized what it was going to mean. But yeah, just look at it.
Was that like a connection? Like, did they name it intentionally like that, or is it just a bad coincidence?
I don't know. I mean, it really is exactly the same as Honey, where you know it does codes on eBay and Chewy and all these normal places you shop, but they just called it something.
It probably came from Lollipop, like, you know what I'm saying? They think Lollipop. We'll just get rid of the pop. We'll just call it Lolly.
Yeah,
that's probably was their thought process.
There's just some stuff you can't use anymore, or you just can't use anymore. You know, like here's a joke that I had to choke on when we talked to Brady Heron. You know, he'd be like, "What?" Because all of his channels end in file. I'm like, you know, you could start a bicycling enthusiasm channel and call it Pedal File. Like, like, obviously you can't do that right
How have you never told me that joke before? I'm like really offended and upset that you've never shared. You've been holding on to Pedal File
for like 6 months. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we need to call bike commuters.
Pedal files.
Pedal files.
They cut you off on the road. You just say, "Hey, you pedal file." Oh, beautiful.
It's a good
joke.
You
just can't, you can't use anything with any kind of connotation. But what you just said, Cody, is like you can't even state something that should be totally non-controversial.
I think it's just a good lesson that that Twitter is. It is a mental institution. It really is. It is a place where people will say the things that they would never say in real life, which of course it's anonymous on the internet. Mm-hmm. But you think about that in practice, but when you see it in reality and you just see hundreds of people defending, you know, sexualized drawings of little girls, and they're like, this is cool and this is great and you're stupid for going after this. And it gives you such a darker view of the world, I guess. Yeah. It's like you just think how many of these people are truly out there. And it felt like I was just in a Reverso Bizarro world for at least like half a day. Because normally I'm used to somebody hating on me because of like, I say something about politics or something. I don't know. I got in a fight last year on Twitter with a bunch of Russians when all the time. There's anything I said about Ukraine, a bunch of pro-Russian people would come after me. And honestly, I look back on those days with nostalgia. Debating the Russians about an actual war that is happening now was better than even communicating with any of those lolly people. They were the scum of the earth. They truly were. That made a worse pit in my stomach than that. So that says something. I'm impressed. I'm impressed that we could go even lower. So but I deleted all of it because it just, even interacting with them made me look bad, if that made sense. Like, it wasn't funny anymore. Yeah. It was just, it looked bad. And now the fact that I'm even bringing this up again, now it makes me look bad, even worse. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Yeah.
It's now cemented forever.
So fascinating, the whole thing, because yeah, it is weird how you can send out these kind of bat signals in a way on Twitter really easily. Like, this is a thing that freaks me out. I think about probably more often than I should, that you can type like not too many words in a certain order and just create chaos for yourself, for a whole bunch of other people, like ruin a lot of people's day. I guess make a lot of other people's day who revel in the chaos. But the power of that is something that I don't think we ever really talk about. I mean, I guess we talk about the ramifications of it in like slices of certain scenarios in which it happens, such as this one. But for the most part, I think it's really underappreciated that you can make a SpongeBob meme about Puss in Boots 2, and all of a sudden thousands of people are like setting their sights on you and your opinion and your slight of the importance of an animated movie.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because it's not, none of this is just like in a bubble. It's always some other preconceived notion that certain communities take away. Like for cartoon Twitter, for instance, they hate nothing. They don't hate. Well, there's nothing more that they hate than people saying that cartoons are just for kids. Like, that is something that they absolutely hate. And it's true. Cartoons are not just for kids. Cartoons are for everybody. Anything animated, like animation is a medium. It isn't a genre. And so, but they always deal with people saying that. And so when they saw my meme, they automatically took that history of people saying cartoons are just for kids, and they took it all out on me, essentially, because they thought that I was one of those people that do that. And it made me realize that just is all of these little subcultures and communities on Twitter, and they all have their own lingo, and they all have their own history of dealing with certain rhetoric. And when they see some outsider sort of espousing the same viewpoint that they see all the time, they latch onto that and they attack that. It's like a white blood cell attacking attacking something, and it's like, I guess that was just something that you don't really think about until you say those, like you said, those certain types of words or phrases that just set a community off. And for the animation community, it was even suggesting that this cartoon that is come on, it's Puss in Boots 2. Like, it's for families. It is for kids. It's a great movie. I love it, but you can't act like, even suggesting that a 7-year-old is watching this is a crazy idea. Like, come on. Like, I like cartoons. I get stuff that's for kids, and you can like stuff that's for kids. I like Bluey. Twitter was talking about Bluey a shit ton, and they're like, "Oh man, Bluey, it's crazy." And it's like, yes, Bluey is good, but you can't act like that's not for children. Like, it's still for children. Yeah. And then and then there's the darker aspect of that, which is when I said the thing about the anime community and lollies, and it turned out that they also frequently have people that say that it is creepy to like lolly stuff. And they have their own lingo about outsiders that say that. They have their own terms about people that dislike lolly stuff. And it's just so weird just to see that. It's like they're talking in an entirely different language about an out group. And I mean, that's just anywhere on Twitter. It's just, you can divide it up between all these different subcultures. But it's funny that politics, as much as people talk about Twitter being a cesspool of politics, that's probably the most normal aspect of Twitter. Because once you go below that surface, it's a hellscape. Just don't do it.
People really
don't
are
tap into it.
Though. They program themselves into reading things a certain way, no matter what it is. And if you're on Twitter, by the way, follow Internet Hall of Fame. It's a really good account that posts just great things from the internet, memes, exchanges, whatever. There's this one screenshot where I forget if it was Trump or Biden, but one of their tweets, this guy replied like, "Trump is not my president." And you can imagine the people on both sides going, crazy over that, supporting it, criticizing it, whatever. And somebody asked him why, whatever. And he's like, "Well, I'm from India." So he was literally saying, "I do not live in this country and this person is not my president." It had nothing to do with politics, but he activated with that one phrase, activated the ire and the cheering and the fist pumping, just every thing on the spectrum of responses, because all those people were programmed to read it a certain way and assign the value that they wanted to it. It's really kind of crazy when you see that in action. It can be very funny, like that example, but generally it's not great.
Yeah, generally it isn't. And I think the tribalism that happens on the internet is just I find it fascinating. Even if you become a victim of it, it's still fascinating because it's just these little tiny things that separate people, but they make it their entire identity. And I'm not even talking about politics. I just mean being a fan of cartoons at all. Like if someone takes that and they make that their entire identity, or I know somebody whose entire identity is they're a fan of Halo, and they are not just a fan of Halo, they are a fan of Halo Infinite. And so I follow this guy, and he's just all day arguing with people who are a fan of the older Halo games that were made by Bungie. And so now the already small Halo community is infighting within itself between Bungie fans and 343 fans. And just to see this happen in real time, and it just becomes this factionalism is very interesting. It's just like the way that communities can happen all just from enjoying something similar is funny. It's funny at the end of the day. That's what social media is dumb, and taking it seriously is dumb. So it is funny, but it's also it's an insight into how people think.
We want to help you make something and mean something. And we say that phrase all the time because when you're making something and you know it means something, even if it's just to you, that's when you feel pretty good about what you're creating. The support for the Create Unknown in recent weeks has been incredible. Animators, artists, musicians, YouTubers, aspiring filmmakers, comedians, it is crazy how talented everybody in this community is. Consider joining the Create Unknown Patreon. Every dollar that comes through goes straight into the podcast and its community. That means more highlights videos. It means a big Minecraft project that's on the way. And eventually we'd like to manufacture custom piss bottles so you never have to leave your battle station. And being a patron unlocks participation in all of our live recordings. You've seen the roster of guests we've had. Having access to their minds is a unique opportunity. You can go to patreon.com/thecreateunknown or click the link that's in the description. Every little bit helps, and your support means absolutely everything to us. Patreon.com/thecreateunknown, links in the description. We appreciate you, Space Cowboys.
Have you seen this happen, this tribalism and factionalism that did not exist in the past? Have you seen this happen with any historical topics?
Oh, yes. It was worse. I would say the worst example is the chariot races in the Byzantine Empire. There were...
What?
It was just like how we have soccer hooligans today and clubs and sports and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. During the reign of the Byzantines, Eastern Rome, chariot races were the biggest thing. They were bigger than sports. They were a form of politics. Imagine if your favorite NFL team was mixed with your political beliefs. And that's what, that was the divide between the blues and the greens. And I'm pretty sure they were the blues and the greens. I'm not super well versed. I'm pretty sure it is blues and the greens were the teams. Let me look it up for a sec. Chariot racing, was it blues and the greens? Yes, it was. Okay, so yes, the blues and the greens were basically the two teams in chariot racing, and they were tied to the politics within the Byzantine culture itself. And it would be whenever the emperor would side with one team, it would cause chaos. And it would be to such the extent that even the upper elite would have their own favorite team, and then they would do everything within their political power to influence that team to win. And there was a riot between the blues and the greens that led to the deaths of tens of thousands of people in the city. Like, all of them were Eastern Roman, but all of them were divided between blues and greens, and it led to an actual popular revolt and a riot that they brought in the actual army to quell, and they slaughtered like tens of thousands of people. And I'm just saying this off the top of my head, but if anyone can clarify this, I would appreciate it. But yes, that was a thing that I remember happening or hearing about, and it's very interesting that was something that occurred. I can't really think of any other time that has happened to such an extent, because normally it is just political. But yeah, that was one time that they were divided, and they.
Has there been? I'm gonna meld the two topics that we've just hit here. Have you seen something like Twitter develop, like almost like support for something historical in a way that didn't really exist in the past? Like people.
I mean, if we're talking straight up politics,
I guess an interest in any historical thing. I mean, so like I've seen. Like a surge on people getting really into like the Russian army or the Soviet army rather of the World War II era. You know, they just like got obsessed with it. There's always been some people who were into that, you know, but like has social media amplified anything in history? I guess any historical topic. That's my question. Yeah,
I would say it's purely from your political from like the political realms that you're on. But I would say starting off from the left, there is just like you said, it's a lot of Soviet Union posting. There's a lot of like Spartacist, the Spartacist Revolution in Germany. There's oddly enough, Huey Long. Huey Long was the governor of. He wasn't even really necessarily leftist, but he was populist. He was the governor of Louisiana. And
he was the Kingfish, right? Was that his name?
Yeah. And so I would say that's definitely he's been popularized because of that. And I would say also, I mean, it depends on what circles of leftism you go into, but Mao especially within Twitter, if you say anything bad about Mao, they will come after you. And that's something that I think without social media they wouldn't have really done. On the right, it's dark. It's pretty dark. I would say the one thing that they really talk about a lot is Rhodesia.
Interesting.
I never even heard about Rhodesia until right-wing, seeing right-wing Twitter. And they will, that's the one thing that they're always posting about is Rhodesia. And then they used to be Crusades, but not as much anymore. It's mostly Rhodesia and like Andrew Jackson. I think that's one.
Why do you think the Crusades faded? Because now that you mention that, I do remember, 10 years ago, for example, that was it seemed like a pet topic, and as soon as you said it, I'm like, hey, I don't really see that much anymore.
Because ironically, they kind of shifted to, I guess you could call it Islam posting. Like there's a weird thing that's happening on right-wing Twitter of conservatives posting pro-Islam like based memes saying like inshallah and Sharia law and stuff like that, and that's kind of replaced crusade memes a little bit. So in that 10 years we went from the Crusades to then the opposite of the Crusades, and that's really just because they don't like gay people, so that's why they post about that. But I also think it became overplayed. I think just saying Deus Vult and stuff, I don't think they do that anymore. this really shows how badly my online experience is, where I know both the memes on the left and the memes on the right. It's it's a hellscape. It really is. I just went out. That's all. So yeah, I think it's funny that very obscure historical things that like you don't learn about in high school, they get propagated by these political online things. And I think there's just like little things that normal people in your day to day don't give a shit about. They're like non-political things that have become political in a way. On the left, any mention of cars really just gets people pissed. Anything of U.S. or North American infrastructure of car dependent cities, the left hates. And there's like car dependent cities are, in some ways there are criticisms against it. But they'll overly obsess over trains. They'll talk about bikes and anything that has to do with walkable cities, which is, I'm not saying they're wrong. It's just that's something that they fixate on, and it's interesting. And then trying to figure out I'm trying to remember what the right even fixates on. Architecture. I think if you spent any time on Twitter, and you'll see those like Roman statue profile pic accounts, and they all like called like Western aesthetics or something like that, and they'll post pictures of like churches or like old 19th century buildings, and they'll just be like the same variation of where did we go wrong, and that's pretty much this is what we lost. So there's a lot of non-political things that become political, and even the poor people that don't even attribute the stuff to politics, and they'll bring it up, and then other people will then come after them and be like, "What'd you mean by that?" And they'll be like, "I just like architecture. I don't know what you're talking about." And be like, it's funny. It's very interesting seeing you're like a Gen Xer or some random old person that doesn't know anything about the lingo of kids obsessing over bike paths or 19th century neo-Baroquism. And they'll be like, "What'd you mean by that?" I don't know.
Why do you think everybody is so interested in not leaving other people alone? Instead of just saying, you love cars, I love cars. I think the car is one of the greatest tools of freedom ever invented. The automobile is amazing. I love it. Well, you know what? If you live in Oxford, England, you're probably going to be a bike person, a pedal something, if you will. Well, look, that city is really a bike city, famously so. If you watch a show like Morse, he's an inspector in Oxford. There are not a ton of cars. Well, look, that's fine. But why are people in both situations just saying, "Hey, do your bike thing. I'll do my car thing," and then the bike people saying the opposite? Why are they so intent on making sure the other people do it their way?
Well, at least from the leftist perspective, they see car dependency as sort of ostracizing the poor working class, people that can't afford a car or gas or anything like that.
Let me tell you, the poorest people I know have the most cars on their lawn.
Accurate.
That's true.
100% accurate. Yes.
My town actually passed an ordinance that you could only have 2 non-working vehicles on your lawn, and people went ballistic. It was like one of those scenes where like the community, everybody attends the town meeting and has the pitchforks and torches, and they ended up taking that away. It was awesome.
That's funny. Okay, in that case, I'm guessing it's a rural. The more rural, they definitely have a lot more cars. In that case, but when they're talking about like cities and people that can only like take public infrastructure, buses or trains or anything like that, and it's true. There isn't. If you have a car centric society, it does sort of give these people less options, and you have people that are walking on the streets and and it's a dangerous environment. Do you know what a stroad is?
No.
Okay, it's called a street road. If you went into probably any city in North America, you would see it. It's a road that is multiple lanes only for cars, and it has really no walking options for pedestrians. And you can't take a bike or anything like that. people on Twitter always talk about Stroads and how Stroads are bad. And it's because, if you don't have a car, they are very difficult to walk down. You have no other option other than using a car. So I guess to bring back my point, when people get so defensive over this stuff, and they want, they want people to sort of change the layout of cities in the US, it's because it's not always just about, oh, I'm annoyed with cars, or I'm annoyed with bikes, or anything like that. It's how do we have our cities operate? How do we prioritize the poorer people in our society? And it's funny that you can see how a society prioritizes all of its citizens just in the layout of how its roads are. And so that's what they kind of mean, that's why people get so defensive over it. I'm sorry for a genuine answer, but that's actually what they were.
The dynamics of all of it is just fascinating to me.
I'm sorry for over-explaining it.
No, it's awesome. And by the way, some of the things that you've talked about, I'm familiar with, and I'm so amazed and impressed at how perfectly you describe and summarize what's happening. Like when you said the Greek statue avatar thing, in the names like, Western art, like that is such a perfect description of what I see happen on Twitter. When you see an avatar like that, you kind of know what's coming.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think it just shows I spend way too much time online. I think that's all. If you could perfectly encapsulate and describe the Twitter experience, I think that's a red flag right there. I think I should spend less time online.
And why do you think the people who are so passionate about things, whether it's Soviet military history or enlarging bike lanes, why do you think they're doing it on Twitter as opposed to what would they have done 25 years ago even? If you were really into Soviet militaria, what's your play there? Do you just talk about it to all your friends, everybody you meet? How do you do it?
There probably would be, I mean, if there's anything, there might be the occasional small club of enthusiasts that might meet up. But I think honestly, people probably just would never mention it to anybody, or they would never even develop these affinities in the first place. Like the internet is, it's a blessing and a curse. And there's a lot of micro information, a lot of small things that the average American would otherwise never know about. But because of the internet and because information is so accessible, it becomes front page. And so then you have stuff like people talking about roads, or people talking about the Soviet military, or people talking about Rhodesia or architecture. And it's stuff that normally, if somebody just went through the public school system, you never hear about any of this stuff. Maybe if you read a book or something, or you went to the library and it like caught your interest, maybe, but you would never have a community of other people that also think this very niche thing that you think. And I think that's just that's the way that subcultures develop. Everyone has a very small little niche thing that they like, and it forms in a bubble and it evolves into something bigger than it otherwise would have. So yeah, that's why we get stuff like that.
I do agree that it seems like the people just wouldn't become obsessed with whatever like the micro obsession is, because you wouldn't know who else to talk to about it. And it also kind of leans into a discussion that we've had on this podcast before about how few unifying cultural moments there seem to be anymore, where like everyone watches Seinfeld, like the Seinfeld finale had like 100 million. I don't know. I'm just pulling that number out, but like everybody watched that show. Yeah. Everybody knew Cheers as well. It was the most popular show. Yeah. Cheers, MASH before it, whatever. Like these are old TV shows now, but at the time that was just what everybody did. Everybody knew these shows, and movies were largely like this. Music was largely like this as well, where you had a handful of like ultra popular people that kind of everybody liked, or you would pick your favorite one. But now everyone is so atomized because there is this opportunity to like continually chisel down who you are as an individual based upon your preferences, that you all of a sudden enter this point in which it's such a niche that you can find other people who do it, so that helps sort of it helps bolster your interest in it, because very few people want to be like hyper focused on something that they have no ability to talk to anybody else about, right? Like everyone wants some sort of shared communal experience, even if that community is only like 10 other people. It just seems like there's this weird balance between being extremely individual, but finding your people to be extremely individual with. And then there's just like a million of these little pockets. And you can, like you said, develop your own lingo and create your own enemies and outgroups and tribes and people you go to war with, conceptually. But at the end of the day, we are, I think, continually going to see this become the norm, because how does it not? It'll never go back to how it was. It's not possible.
Yeah. So sometimes you really just kind of look back on the past and be like, yeah, things are kind of simpler. Like they really were simpler in that fact that everyone just watched the same thing and they watched the same media. I think it's a blessing and it's a curse. There's just stuff back then was so scrutinized. It was so corporatized. Everything was under had to be approved by hundreds of different people before it was shown to the masses. And now anybody can make a song or make a video or our jobs are entirely because these niches can exist. Because otherwise we can never do the stuff that we did if we lived 30 years ago. We could never go up to some executive and convince them that our particular brand of entertainment is going to be profitable, because it wouldn't be. It would be to like a few thousand, maybe potentially millions of people, but it wouldn't be hundreds of millions. I think it's made media more segmented, but it's also allowed for a lot more interesting things to be created. There's always conversation of, movies and music and stuff used to be so good back then, but it's like there's a lot of great things being made now. It's just you got to search for it more than you otherwise would have. I think an interesting thing is how bad regular TV has been. Have you ever watched a show that's still going on like CBS or NBC or anything now?
Yeah,
it's bad. It's
not great,
really bad.
Very difficult to get into. So I guess is how I'd put it.
Huh?
Why are they so bad? I haven't watched like a CBS.
They have
a long time.
Well, it's because society. It's just like you said. Everything's become so segmented. The audience that they would have had 30 years ago no longer exists, and if they're still watching, they're like 60 plus. So the shows that they're making now are designed for people that are in their 60s or the most general audience possible, and so they have the most safest jokes. They have the most blandest, like everything about them. There's apparently a Night Court reboot.
That's right.
I didn't know that. And Red Letter Media just did a great video about it, because they just showed the first episode and then just stared blankly at the screen. But it's horrible, atrocious comedy. They don't even say jokes really. They just say regular things, and then some editor lazily put a laugh track, because that's supposed to train. You're supposed to laugh even though they don't even say a joke. That's kind of how bad cable or network TV has just become, because
that lowest common denominator aspect was my gripe with it, where everything felt extremely formulaic and predictable. And it's nuts, because if you think about TV, even 10, 15 years ago, you had shows like Lost, for example, which were really thrilling, good network shows. And now I can't even remember what I tried to do, but I specifically, Manifest, does that sound right? About a flight that like disappeared and then reappeared 5 years later or something. Maybe somebody in the chat knows of this show. But I saw on Netflix that they had like 4 seasons of it. Like, okay, well, if it's lived for a little while, maybe it's okay. It wasn't. I watched a couple episodes and I realized I had no idea who was who and what was happening, because I was like looking at deal sites the whole time. I just could not keep myself tuned into that show. And every time I've tried to watch network stuff, that's happened. But I wanted to ask you something very small, very easy. It's roughly about saving humanity. Because I think you've got the solution to it here. Okay. If we have a problem with being segmented and then digging in like ticks into our weird little niches and not having any shared cultural literacy or anything like that, you've gone really deeply into a lot of things, which is why you can pull something out about Byzantine chariot hooligans. So you're somebody who has gone really deeply into a lot of niche things, but you're really healthy. I mean, unless there's some crazy stuff that we don't know about you, you seem really well put together with all of it. Yeah, what are you doing that is working when the psychos on Twitter are provoked by the slightest thing? What can they do to be more like you?
I mean, I think a lot of it is down to, I know it sounds bad, but I think you never know what someone's going through. Like, we don't know what the personal lives of these Twitter users are. A lot of times when they do talk about their personal lives, they don't have great ones. They don't have a good support structure. I'm very lucky that I have a great family, and I have a caring wife, and I have friends that I can lean on and talk to, but a lot of people don't. And I think a problem with why there's so many crazy communities and so many, sort of angry people online is because personal lives of people have kind of collapsed, especially over the last 10 years. People are really antisocial now. And I'm not just saying that in the way of, put down the phones, go outside, touch grass. It's just the way that our culture is kind of developed now. It makes it almost impossible to be able to socialize. It's without going online and without doing these niche things. And it's hard. And it's something that like 20, 30 years ago, people could have went and met a circle of friends or something like that. But now it's just everything's isolated, and COVID certainly didn't help. And when you're isolated, when you don't have that good structure, or you have a disagreement with your family or something like that, you turn to online. And that's why they have the term terminally online. And it doesn't just mean like, you're going online because you're a crazy person. It's because people use this as a replacement for a social structure and emotional stability that they otherwise would have. And so when we think, why are these people so passionate and so angry when an outsider talks about their community, it's because people this is people's personality now. This is what they care about. And if somebody insults that, they're insulting them personally because they have nothing else. And I don't mean that in a bad way or like to insult them. It's just that's the nature of how people being isolated from one another. That's what happens. And it's kind of I guess, to wrap it into how do we stop this? I guess it comes down to just kind of looking out for people in real life. It's if people in real life happen to, that if you know anybody that spends too much time online, or they're distancing themselves from their friends or their family or whatever, try to be that emotional support for them, that they don't need the computer as a crutch, because the computer's kind of like a crutch. It's almost just as dangerous as somebody going to booze or going to drugs for their support. And in this case, it's a bunch of like-minded people that think exactly like them. And sometimes that's a good thing, because, people don't have real support structures in real life. Sometimes people are just, that happens. That's the sad thing. But sometimes people do have, they could have gotten help, but they're just ignored by people in their real life. And so they turn to the computer. Am I making sense with this? Am I rambling?
Yes. No. All of this makes a lot of sense because it kind of lines up a lot with what I'd been thinking about. Well, what your encounter with the fandoms, to bring this all the way back to the Puss in Boots thing, really got me thinking a lot about fandoms, about these sort of like little armies of people who attach and really create their identity based around being a K-pop stan, or an animation defender, or whatever it is, or obsessed with like some particular celebrity and literally their Twitter account is just like pictures of whomever, I don't know, pick a celebrity. And that's, you know, and it makes sense for like younger people. So, all right, to go a little like Vsauce 2 on this, I started thinking about, years ago, I did this video on why do we collect. I think it's just called The Invention of Collecting now.
Yeah.
And there's this incredible book about the psychology of collecting by Werner Munsterberger. And one of the things that Munsterberger believed was that babies, when babies first realize that they're no longer part of their mother, then they realize that they are alone. What often happens is they will create some sort of attachment to an object because it's essentially the first thing that isn't them or their mom. And it becomes this kind of like surrogate emotional object, whether it's like a blankie or a teddy bear or, you know, a pillow or like another type of stuffed animal that they become obsessed with for like a really long time because they create this emotional attachment with this object so that they don't feel alone because mom's not around. I'm not part of mom anymore. Here's like my Teddy, and like Teddy will be with me so that I don't feel alone. And I feel like, I started thinking, I haven't read about this. So this is all just armchair Kevin Liebert ideas at this point. So maybe there's like plenty of research about this and I shouldn't just be making this up, but I'm going to make this up. I then started thinking about how like your like preteen and teen years are all sort of about this rebellious nature in which you're trying to separate yourself from your parents, like purposefully separate yourself from your parents to prove that you are an individual, that you're separate from them. But like, you know, your mom and dad like this type of music. Well, I like the opposite. I like this type of music or whatever it is. They dress like this. That's how my parents dress. I dress like this instead. Why? Because I'm not like my parents. I am an individual. I am myself. And it seems to me that like the fandom stuff also becomes a way in which these, because I remember definitely being like way more into things and attaching it to my identity as like a 14, 15-year-old than I am now as an adult. So you say like, oh, I love this band and I have all of these shirts of this band. And like, if you say anything bad about this band, I will be personally offended and I will, you know, go to war with you. So I wonder like how much of that feeling, like that phenomenon is continuing past that. It's no longer a stage of development that people are getting stuck there. Because like what you're saying is like there aren't easy avenues anymore for people to be happy with who they are as an individual outside of that stage of like overly clinging to something like Star Wars or whatever. Yeah. And now they're like, you know, 30 years old and they're still acting in a way like a 14-year-old would by being overly attached to a fandom as a proxy for their identity, for their personal identity.
I think that's, I guess if I also want to pseudo, I agree with that. That sounds all accurate. I fully agree with that. I would say if I want to be a pseudo-economist, my theory for maybe why people in their 30s are still attached to this stuff is almost as a stagnation in life development because of economic factors for the younger generations. And it's going to sound like I'm pulling this out of my ass, but a lot of young people are still living at home, or they're not owning a house, or they're still stuck in an apartment. And these are phases that they should have moved from and that our parents' generation moved away from. But because of stuff like the recession or COVID or rapid inflation or the housing market going absolutely insane, there are so many people that should have been able to afford a house by now, should have been able to start a family, and they can't. And that's also tied with the more antisocial nature of the internet, and so many people not being able to form those connections, it is almost a way of stunted adolescence, like you say. And they sort of don't grow out of that because they can't, because of factors outside of their control. So yeah, no, I fully agree with that. One kind of more lighthearted way of putting this: what if it isn't just people that are emotionally stunted? What if there are just a lot more kids on internet and on Twitter than we really give credit? Like, I think there's a lot more teens that shouldn't be on Twitter that are on Twitter. And they pretend like they're adults. Because I saw, like, the other day, there was one of those people that had a Roman profile pic, and they're like some trad Catholic Twitter account or whatever. And they were talking about, they're like, what was the most recent disaster, or like what was the first major news event that you saw on TV? And he said Trump getting elected.
I
saw
this
7 years old.
Recent news, yeah, what was the most recent news event you ever saw? And he said Trump getting elected. And then everyone was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, he wasn't 7. He later admitted to being 16. But this was somebody that had a Roman profile pic. They had extreme political views, this whole worldview that they kept espousing all over the internet. And they're 16 years old. How many people are like that on Twitter? How many people do we argue with that might actually just be literal children? And that's why we have people that are so passionate about Puss in Boots or extreme politics that normal people don't care about, because they are actually just children. And that's all we're doing. We're just arguing with teenagers.
There's this huge misalignment right now. And you talking about the economic side made me think of this, because in the past, recent past, Kevin and I have talked about data on like experiential data with teens about them dating, for example, and how many teens drink, and just like all the social behavior with teens. And they aren't doing nearly as much of anything as they did in the past. So you have broad general experience happening much later, if it happens at all. And there was a great Twitter thread the other day about how many 20-something women this person knew who had never been in a serious relationship. That's something that was mostly unthinkable decades ago. And it's unthinkable in other countries. So you get this kind of arrested development there. You have a bunch of economic factors that don't help at all. Yeah. And then you have the outlets that we've been talking about to further entrench whatever worldview you think you have, whatever limited experience you do have, going down a potentially ruinous rabbit hole with that. These things weren't out of alignment decades ago. They all kind of happened as they should happen. You got the life experience where you weren't living at home until you were 35. You were doing stuff in the meantime. Everything kind of fit. And now all that we've talked about here is very disjointed, and it seems pretty hard to do anything good with those circumstances when they're so out of whack.
It's always easy to kind of go doomer and sort of think that this trajectory could just keep getting worse. I guess to keep it on sort of a lighthearted note, during the Industrial Revolution, you had all the cities were packed, and they were filthy, and they were utterly full of poor working class people that were crammed into, 7 or 12 people into a single apartment. And that was what people of the time believed was going to be the future. It was just going to get worse like that. And they imagined that perhaps you'd have, like, the cities would just be these utter pits of, millions of people just crammed together. That's kind of true, but like the point was, they believed that eventually it was going to lead to a global famine, essentially. Like, there was going to be so many people, they couldn't feed them all, and then everyone would die. or at least a large amount of people would die. But they couldn't perceive that technology would make agriculture easier. They couldn't perceive that there was going to be something called the Green Revolution, which made crops not fail as less. And so I think as much as we can be like, kids are antisocial today. There is problems with people not being able to have houses and stuff like that. But there is always a possibility that this could be just something in our time right now, and this isn't a sign of things to come. There could be something that we can't even predict right now that it could either be a policy, it could be a political movement, it could be a form of technology that makes it so, people aren't antisocial like they are now. Sure. I got one personal theory in my mind is it's going to feel weird. I'm going to say VR is going to ironically make people more social in the future.
How?
Well, because the way that we communicate right now is through audio, or we communicate through text or whatever. And that's what a lot of teens right now, or a lot of people are communicating through text on their smartphone. I think that VR is going to completely revolutionize the way that we communicate with anybody. Because instead of talking to somebody through a screen, through VR, you can talk to somebody like they were right in front of you.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not the same as actually talking to somebody in real life, but it's the same exact sort of social characteristic. It's the same body movements. It's the same way of talking to somebody in real life. Hell, even Facebook. I know it's Facebook and Meta is a meme and everything like that, but they have developed an avatar technology that is pretty much photorealistic to what you would actually look like in real life. And it's really freaky to see. But I could imagine this easily happening in 10 years. Instead of kids being antisocial and texting or whatever, you just have VR glasses that you could socialize with people as if they were actually there in real life. So this is something that it could easily change, all because the technology changed. I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I'd never really thought about that on how. One of the guests we had in the past, he's been on twice, Sean Malone. He's talked a lot about this, and in some of his videos that he used to make on the Out of Frame series about like the population bomb that would cause famine, that people couldn't conceive of technological advancements making a problem easier, whether it's we're going to run out of fossil fuels and never considering that we're getting so much better at finding them and extracting them that we have more than we think, that cars are going to get significantly better with gas mileage, things like that. And Jen Mafasanti in the chat mentions Ehrlich being completely wrong about the population hitting a point that was totally unsustainable. We're better at farming, like you said. So yeah, we truly can't conceive of advances that solve some of these problems. And what you said is really interesting to me, that VR seems like it would dig us deeper into this problem. But the fact that it's more realistic than a tweet, not even just audio, but like the way we communicate now is basically text on mobile phones and with text elsewhere for the most part. So making it more realistic would maybe you develop more of an interest in other people, different types of people. Maybe you get more comfortable when you're 15 talking to people you want to date. Who knows? Maybe this format really could solve a lot of these problems. That's super interesting.
I think it's something that any new technology can be used for dystopian reasons, but it can also be used for positive reasons. And I think especially so Apple is probably going to announce a new VR headset, like their equivalent of what the iPhone was in 2008, how that completely transformed technology and there's an explosion. They're probably going to announce something like that later this year. And as soon as that happens, VR is going to be at least not at first, but by the end of this decade, it is going to be a major aspect of our lives, just like smartphones are. And I think that's going to be funny how outdated smartphones are going to seem. Like sending a text to somebody is going to be seen as like sending an IM, or sending a Skype message or or even calling someone on the phone. And it's going to be funny because it'll just have a face. You can be able to have a face to actually communicate with somebody. And I know I'm rambling. So.
No, it's all good. I mean, especially because like you were saying, we sort of technologied our way out of that stagnation and that doom that was proposed, in the 19th century, and probably going to take some technologying our way out of sort of the challenges of today that we've talked about. I do want to hit one question from a longtime great patron of ours before we let you go, because I think it's a really interesting one that I wouldn't have thought of before. I don't know where he pulled this question out of, but Baseway wants to know if you could create a Mandela effect, what would it be? Have you even thought about such a thing before?
Oh, okay. A Mandela. Okay, to create a Mandela effect, I would.
I'm happy that you don't have an answer ready, because it would be kind of sinister. It would have like sinister undertones if you were like, "Yeah, I've mapped this out. I'm just waiting for it."
Yeah, it'd be a little strange. I guess. Okay, as a funny way would probably be it would probably cause the most amount of chaos. Maybe some people would imagine The Simpsons as a darker shade of yellow than they actually are. And so everyone would perpetually argue whether Homer Simpson is the right hue or not. And I would find that hilarious. That's my bullshit answer. I don't have an actual genuine Mandela effect, because the real Mandela effects are kind of hilarious already. Like people thinking that Fruit Loops are spelled with like actual fruit and not like two O's, or Berenstain Bears.
Right. I remember the Berenstain one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that The Simpsons are just a different color, but only slightly. It would be any Mandela effect that is so mundane that it would make people go insane just like thinking about it. So yeah, I don't know. That's a terrible answer. Do you have another question? That's better.
Well, I do have another question. I couldn't remember if we asked you the last time you were on the show. Maybe we hadn't started doing this yet. So I'll just ask it again, and you'll either answer it the same way or you'll have a fresh answer for this response. But we've been, trying, at least I've been trying to remember to ask people at the end of every episode, what makes a person interesting?
Saying the exact opposite of what I say. I think, I don't know. What makes a person interesting is, I don't even feel like an interesting enough person to give a perspective on what makes someone interesting. That implies I'm interesting. So but I guess what would make someone interesting to me is if they can formulate their opinions well, if they have their own original opinions, if they simply don't regurgitate what others say, I guess. I don't know. I think what makes someone interesting is completely different to anybody. What someone finds interesting, someone else would find absolutely boring. And it sounds like a pop-out answer of it's subjective, but I guess what makes somebody interesting to me is if they can just maintain my attention. That's it. I don't know.
The clarity that you mentioned, that's actually, I've never thought about how important that is. But when somebody is really clear about what they think about something or whatever position they've got, when they're coherent about it, it's way more pleasant to listen to them, even if you totally disagree, even if it's crazy.
Yeah.
But if it's put together and you can follow it, they're automatically like in the top 10% of people you talk to. That's kind of no matter what you believe or who you are, you got to be clear.
Yeah, that's something I've been personally trying to change for a while. I kind of ramble. I catch myself rambling, and I always wonder if I'm making sense to the people that I'm talking to. And so I've been catching myself, like I record myself sometimes and be like, am I making the point the best way that I can? And that's why even sometimes, like, especially for these podcasts and stuff, I'm just nervous because I'm like, am I making a point that I could have summarized quicker? Am I wording stuff right? But yeah, I think the person that can most effectively use the fewest words possible to describe something, that is, that's how they keep somebody's attention. It's something to work on, People don't speak the same their entire lives. People kind of change, or That's my answer. Use the fewest words possible. Don't waste time.
I noticed that with your my old content was terrible video, which we didn't even get into. Maybe we'll have to talk about that next time you were on, because we just talked to Caddy about this recently, who, changed the title of all of his videos, because he does all of his old videos to denote that they are specifically like old and sort of out of his personal favor. And you literally made
a good idea.
Video roasting your own content. So that is a really interesting thing that I'm starting to, I guess, see more of from creators. I guess we're at the point in YouTube now where people can look back and say, wow, my stuff from 7-8 years ago was pretty bad.
Enough people have finally been around long enough to have that perspective. There's there's like an old portfolio to look back on now. It's like if you pull out old homework from high school, you're like, God, I can't believe how stupid I was.
Basically,
yeah. Now we can do it with YouTube.
Well, I think because I started this channel my senior year of high school, so it is basically like I just saw a doodle from high school, and thousands of people have saw it. And it's like it would be tied to your job that you do now, and it's so freaky. That
is a weird concept.
Yeah, and it's funny because I kind of used to have pride in those videos, and so I think if anything's taught me over the years, it's that you never should, you should always be confident in what you're making. You should never super self-doubt yourself, but you shouldn't act like the videos that you're creating or anything that you do is beyond criticism, because the biggest critic is always going to be yourself in 4 years. You're always going to look like any video that I make now. I know that 4 years from now, or even 2 years from now, I'm going to think I could have done that completely differently. Or why did I think this was a good idea? And you should always just stay humble when it comes to stuff like that. I think it's a good, and that's kind of why I made that video. Is that video was a different way of saying that my channel turned 10 years old, because my channel turned 10 years old last month. So that was kind of my anniversary video. But instead of doing oh wow, look how far I've come, or look how cool, or like isn't this cool? Isn't this whole channel kind of cool? And it's like, no, 90% of the stuff that I've made, I think, has been trash. Honestly, it is a miracle that I am even that I even have the amount of subscribers that I do. And that was kind of the point of the video. It's like, thank you people for putting up with me for 10 years.
Well, I think that's a great place to end. Congratulations on a decade on YouTube. Everybody check out Cody's channel, Alternate History Hub, if you haven't yet. It was a pleasure having you back on the show, man. Thanks for coming back. I really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me.
All right. Thanks to all of our patrons for hanging out. As always, next week will be Matt and a mystery guest.
Kevin's abandoning me for Valentine's Day. What kind of co-host is that?
Yeah.
Can't believe it.
That is, I know. Sorry, Matt. All right. We are out of here. See you, Space Cowboys.
Thanks for listening to The Create Unknown. We make this show with the support of our patrons. 100% of that goes directly to keeping episodes going every week, and the recent support has been amazing. Sid Poke, NRM, Venture Addicts, Weezer Good, you all really do make this show happen. Thank you to the Tots and Dumpster crew, old and new, who save tiny little lives every month. Thank you to our grizzled, battle-hardened child infantry. Clemente de los Santos, Dan the Latch, Demetrius Andrews, Erica, Farrakhan, Jen Mefasanti, Kevin Menard, Mikhail Steinke, Monahim, Natsu, Penny Peddler, Risebread, Ryan Kinder, Samuel Manser, Sean S., Sean Malone, and Tom Videoger. And a tremendous shout out to our elite baby gang commanders: Atrocious Guff, Kat, Dojangles, Graham Robertson, James Gallagher, Jeff Davis, Orange Vanilla Coke, Patrick Pister, TCU's personal pilot, Andy, Ryan Carroll, Baseweight, Vinthos, Yeetus Deletus, Jonas Walter, Nathan Robinson, Jelksies, and of course, Trevstead. You are the elite. Thank you as well to our indentured servants, producer-editor Ben Webster, Minecraft mogul Laterman, Discord kitten wrangler Conrad, and producer emeritus Dan Yoshua. Thanks to Baseweight for use of Created in the Unknown for the opening theme. Thanks to Electro Voice for giving us mics to sound good on top of it. And a special thanks to Main Gear for powering all of our PC endeavors. The Create Unknown is an Unknown Media production in partnership with Studio 71.